I wanted to do a quick third video here, and this video was going to be on up-potting fig cuttings. So far the first video was rooting fig cuttings. The second one was watering them and sort of giving them light as they start to grow leaves. And the third part of the process is up-potting. So I'll do two up-pottings. I'll do one on the fig pop method. And usually when I do that, I go to a container this size. This is a 4x9 Treepot. You can also do a half a gallon or a gallon size pot, possibly even a 2-gallon pot if you want to. And then I'll do an up potting from here to where I usually go to next, which is a 3 or a 5 gallon, usually probably about a 3-gallon pot from the Treepot style here. And it's one of the more satisfying parts of the process because you really get to see all the roots that you've developed. And the goal here is to keep it so that what you have stays in the same shape when you up pot it. These fig pop bags are great because I can cut away everything and leave just the soil with the roots in it. And I'm placing them in the new pot and backfilling around them with the soil. I don't want to break apart the roots. Fig roots are notoriously delicate at this stage. This one is from March, so the roots here are about a month. This was rooted March 9th, and right now it's the end of April. So this is less than 2 months old. These roots are white. They look really pretty, but they're very delicate. Let me see, I'll zoom in a little bit more on them. So this is a longed out fig here, and the roots on it are going to be extremely delicate. If you were to just break apart the roots on it, a lot of these would shear off the cutting entirely, and it would probably kill it. So we're going to do a little up potting now, and I got my tools over here. One of the first things I use for a lot of this is I have a tub. They sell them at Home Depot and Lowe's. They are for, I think, mixing cement, and they're not very expensive. But it's a great way for me to dump a lot of soil in it, and I can add in anything that I want to add into the mixture before I mix it together. Typically, there's just a few things that I use at up potting. The one is a good quality soil, and I stick with the Pro Mix that I use for the initial fig rooting to keep it consistent and to make it easier, so I can just go buy a bunch of bales of that and go from there. But obviously, at up potting is the first time where you can move to a different type of soil if you want without it being too much of a problem. I find it very convenient to use the same soil I use for rooting the cuttings, which I go with the Pro Mix BX with mycorrhiza as my favorite combination of how cheap it is, and the price point, and the quality of it. And that's what I use in the fig pop bags like I did in the first video, but it's also what I use in the up potting. And I'll just mix a few things in with it to add a few things that the figs are going to need at this point. One of the other reasons I like to do that is one of the tricks to up potting is if you can keep a similar or the same soil, you avoid some of the things that you can get if you transfer to something completely different, like pH shock. If you take a soil that has a totally different pH, totally different composition of what it's made of, it can stunt the growth of something for a period of time. Now, if you've rooted them well and they're absolutely filled with roots, it usually doesn't matter that much. But I get lots of people who tell me that they have issues with figs at up potting, and that they have a lot of figs that die at up potting. There's a couple reasons that might have that, but the biggest one I would say is transferring to something completely different than what they were rooted in. If you rooted something in sand or in water, which aren't my favorite, and then transferred it to a heavy soil, it could smother and kill the roots. They were formed in a different medium. There are ways to do it. You would go gradual with the moisture, but I do like sticking with the same medium for up potting that I did the original rooting in. The other biggest trick is the amount of roots they have. This is on the low end of how many roots I feel like you need. And if you can see the bottom of this bag, there's a lot of roots on this one. And if there are not a lot of roots, what happens is they don't take up enough moisture when you up pot them. When you move this to a different container, if you move it to too large of a container or you wet the soil too much, they can just sit in that wet soil. And if there's not enough roots to draw the moisture in and grow quickly, if these white delicate roots sit for too long in wet soil, they tend to rot and then what happens is people will notice they up-potted their fig, they put something with just a few roots into a 2-gallon container, and they saturated the soil with water, and then they come back a week later and the plant's drooped over and it looks like it's dead. And it might just have had all of the roots rot and die away. So you want to avoid that. So you want a relatively airy mixture, but I do like to stick with the Pro Mix, and it does great for me. For this first cutting here, the long to out, that was rooted almost 2 months ago. I'm going to be moving it from this 4x9 figpop bag to this, I think it's actually 4x10, but I cut them down real small, to a 4x9 inch Treepot. So it's many times the amount of soil. One of the things I like about using the Treepots in this sort of initial stage in the beginning of the season is they have a lot of exposed black surface, and that heats up when it's in the greenhouse or in the yard from the sun, and it can get them to develop a little bit faster than they would otherwise. Black pots work too, but in this situation, the roots are in pretty close proximity to the side, and they grow very well up and down the cutting, up and down the whole tree pot. And then when they get to this size, and this one I up potted maybe a month and a half ago, and it's growing like crazy. There's roots coming out the bottom like crazy. I'll show you, I'll take it out of the pot when I up pot it, but I'll move this to like a 3-gallon pot, because at this point, they're so vigorous, you can almost put them in whatever you want. If you're in a warmer environment, you could put it straight in a 5 or 7-gallon pot or something like that. But to start with the LDA, I'm going to start by clipping off whatever you have holding the bag together. So I use these little ties that are clothing ties that they sell on Amazon, because I could get 1,000 of them at a time, and they're really easy to clip off. They're easier than zip ties to clip off. So quick clip that right off. And from here, I will do my best to not disturb the soil too much. I don't want the soil to fall off of this. So I'm going to leave this here for a second and do the next part of the process. That is taking the tree pot, and I'm going to start filling it with soil. I'm going to fill it a little more than halfway. And when I put a little in the bottom, I'm going to start with a little bit of fertilizer. The fertilizer I'm using here is, a lot of times I'll use either Osmocote or Caliber Coat. This one is Caliber Coat because it's significantly cheaper. I can get it for close to $1 a pound locally. And I'll sprinkle a little bit at the bottom, and then I'll put some more at the top later. This is the stage where the only important thing to add is some sort of slow release fertilizer when you're up potting. If you were to do soil and slow release fertilizer, that's it. That's all you really need. But I do like to add 2 other things anyway. I don't know how well they work. I haven't done a lot of side-by-side comparisons, but I do like to add them. I add a little bit of a pinch of azomite, which is this rock dust here, in all of the cuttings as I up pot them. And then I use a soil with mycorrhizal fungi in it, but I add a pinch of another mycos here. So I'll add a pinch of that too to the soil at the bottom. Those 2 are not necessary. If I were to pick one of them, since the soil I use already has mycorrhizal fungi in it, I would just add a little pinch of azomite or oyster shell or something like that. But you don't have to. So I got that stuff in the bottom. If you have those things, I like to use them. If you don't, just go with the soil and a slow release fertilizer. The slow release fertilizers are very beneficial to figs because they like to feed a lot. But you don't want all of the fertilizer. If you're just doing water-soluble fertilizer, it can wash out of the soil in a rainstorm. It washes out of the soil pretty quickly. So you're using more fertilizer than the plants are getting to use. I really do like slow-release fertilizers. And when I move to in-ground, once the plants go in-ground, I don't use any of the traditional fertilizers anymore. I just use slow-release organic fertilizers, and they do a good job at feeding the microbiology in the soil. The issue with the soil in a pot when you're using something that's very lacking in soil life, that comes in a bag, something like Pro Mix, which it's supposed to be lacking in soil life to be able to root cuttings. But when you do use that, what happens is traditional fertilizers do work a bit better. The traditional slow release fertilizers work a bit better than the organic fertilizers. Although I recommend organic fertilizers for just about everything else. Once they're outside, once they're in a large pot, and once they are in ground, I switch over to the organic fertilizers. So this is just to give them a head start while they don't have the microbiology in the soil. So I cut down the side of the bag, and then the bags have a little seam on the end. And if you get them right, they pull off really easily. This one doesn't have as many roots at the top, so I expect the top to fall away a little bit, and that's okay. But the majority of the bottom, I want to stay completely intact. I want it to hold its shape. If it doesn't hold its shape, it's too early to up pot. So this one now, I cut the bag away, and it's really holding its shape here. When I put it in here, the goal is to be able to sit it down and have the soil level be relatively similar to what it was before. And that'll make it so that it has plenty of room to grow roots down. In these tall pots, they really like to grow roots straight down, and at the end, the goal is to be able to see a bunch of roots coming out of the bottom. And when you see that, it's a good sign that you can up pot that one to a larger container. So right there, and all I'm doing is I place it down and I'm filling around it so that it holds its shape. Give it a little shake, also tap it on the sides. And then I'll also do what I do with the cuttings, which I tap it down a little bit, because the soil can be very loose when you put it in originally. Another thing I wanted to show is, some people ask what to do with the parafilm that we did in the first time, and what I like to do is just leave the parafilm on, and at some point during either this up potting or the next one, you can pull the parafilm off, but it's not necessary. It kind of starts to fall apart on its own. And I wouldn't pull it apart when your cutting has a small amount of roots, because it's very easy to torque the cutting from side to side and have it break roots off. So you don't want to do that. You want to just leave it in place, and then maybe when it gets to the size of that other one where the roots fill the 4x9 pot, you can just kind of peel it off if you want. Or you can leave it and it'll fall off on its own eventually. So now that the container is just about full, I'm going to take another pinch of this caliber coat here and sprinkle it on top. I don't go very heavy on the fertilizers. I really like to use the slow release because you get to do it, you know, once or twice a season. And the majority of the nutrition the plant needs is there. I'm just getting the soil level to where I want it. Just to give you an idea. That is, I don't want to dump it all out, but that is right about there. I don't know if you can see that from there. I'll try and do a couple close-up pictures to include, because it's hard to show and film. See, I'm not trying to compress the soil too much, but I'm not trying to leave it too loose, because then every time I water it, it'll settle down further and further and I'll have to keep adding soil. So I have it to where I want it here, and this one is ready to go. So all that I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to water this a bit, and you could use a regular watering can now. You don't need to use that squirt bottle anymore if you don't want to. I like to use these half-gallon containers where I drill holes in the top of them. It allows me to sort of squeeze the water in so I can control it a little better. But at this size, you want to water it pretty well. You don't have to fully saturate it, especially for the first watering. But you want to give it some water. Give it a decent amount of water. It doesn't have to be crazy. And then this one is ready to go. And this one's all set. I'll put that right over there. The next one I'm working on here is this Marat here, and I'm going to be up potting this into about a 4-gallon container, and it's going from the Treepot to the 3 or 4 gallon container. And this part is one of the most satisfying parts here. This one has grown really well in the greenhouse, and I up potted it from the same sort of plastic bag, the same fig pop cutting style, maybe a month and a half ago, something like that. And it grows really fast. So to get them out of these pots, first of all, the sign I look for to see if they're ready to up pot is if they're growing vigorously, they have large leaves, and then at the bottom, they've got their roots sticking out. So once the roots start to grow out the bottom, it gives you a pretty good idea that they're all through the sides of the container too. But to get these off, these can get pretty tight. I always just pinch the sides, rotate it around, go up and down the cutting and pinch the sides. And then we're gonna do something similar to what we did with the other one. Okay, now's the fun part. Hold the container and tap it down. And usually, if you did a good job before, they are absolutely filled with roots. This has only been in here for probably less than 2 months. And it is completely filling the container with roots. That's how fast and how vigorously fig trees can grow. And it's very satisfying to watch. And then when you up pot it, you know that it's really going to take off. If this were half filled with roots and the soil were falling off it, it wouldn't really have been ready. But once they come out of the bottom like that, you know that there's plenty of roots on this plant. So I'm gonna sit this down right here. Normally I would do that part last once I prepared the container, but I got my 4-gallon container. I'm gonna use that same Pro Mix that I used before, and I'm gonna start filling the container. I'm gonna add another pinch of azomite, like I usually do. Sprinkle it around, and at the bottom, do a pinch of fertilizer, the slow release fertilizer that I used before, the Caliber Coat or Osmo Coat, or anything else slow release that you can get for a good price. The things I typically look for in a fertilizer are looking for something that has NP&K, which basically all of them do, and then something that has some sort of micronutrients too. So Osmo Coat Plus has the micronutrients and Caliber Coat does, but some of the other formulations of it, the regular Osmo Coat Garden, I think, don't. They just have the NP and K. So I really like ones that have a couple of the micronutrients too. All right, and I'm making room for this one. This one is about the same height as the container, so I really have to put it down right in the middle here. And I want the soil level to be the same. I'm gonna hold it in place and I'm gonna fill around it. This second up potting is a little more forgiving. Most people, if they have that many roots in the container, the 4x9 Treepot, it's almost harder to kill them. They really take up potting and abuse a lot better the bigger they get. And once they're about 5 or 6 months old, the figs can take a lot of abuse. You can have mistakes where you didn't water it for a month, not a month, but a week, and it dried out and lost all its leaves, and then you go back to watering again and it'll spring back to life and keep growing. So they're delicate for the first couple months when they're cuttings and when they're just rooted cuttings, but as they get a little bigger, they can be quite a bit tougher. I have plenty of instances where you knock into something and break off a whole section of your tree, and some people think that they killed it, and then it just grows back stronger. We had a Angelito last year get knocked over in a storm, and the whole main growing stem broke off, and that tree just put on 7 more growing branches right away, and it probably grew better because it broke off. So I'm not suggesting you should purposefully break your plants, but it happens, and fig trees will grow right back. They're very vigorous. So these containers, the 3-4 gallon size, they use a good amount of soil. So I'm still backfilling around the 4x9 Treepot cutting here. And then when I get to the top, or almost the top, I'm going to add another pinch of fertilizer. And at this point, I could also add a little mycorrhiza. I just like to sprinkle a little on the roots. But that's not necessary. The only part that is necessary here is getting some kind of fertilizer and some kind of reasonable soil. There's all different kinds out there. I would use what you can get in your area. I would not spend $100 on a bag of soil. That's crazy. But if you can get something for a reasonable price and it's good quality. Okay, almost done here. Even with this one, I'm gonna give it a good tap. Get the soil to sit. The choice of container size will vary a bit depending on where you are. If you're in a colder climate, you're going to want to move up a little slower in size or container. And then if you're in a really warm climate where it's 80 degrees every day, you can go almost as big as you want. You could throw it in a 10-gallon pot sometimes, and it'll just grow to fill that pot. Now, if you live in Vermont and it's going to be 60 degrees for the next 6 weeks, you might not want to throw it in a pot that's way bigger than the pot you were in. You might want to be a little more gradual. Oop, almost dropped it there. And I'm just pressing down around the top here, just to get the soil to a nice level. I know I want to leave a little bit of room at the top, because the last step when they get to a 2 or 3 gallon pot is I like to leave about a ½ inch or an inch of room, and then I will add, along with the fertilizer on top, I will add a little bit of mulch on top. I typically use a hardwood mulch, and I get that in bulk, and I use it on all my potted figs to preserve moisture and sometimes to keep the squirrels out a little bit, because they like to dig in the plants, especially when there's newly potted soil like this. The squirrels around here are nuts, and they like to dig straight through and just tear up the roots of your plant. It drives me crazy. Sometimes the mulch will help, and sometimes a sprinkle of cayenne pepper will help a little bit, but they're difficult. We'll do a little more fertilizer here. This down right here. Just got a little bit of wood mulch from my mulch pile over there. Give you an idea what it looks like. It's all uneven sizes, it's not dyed. It's basically arborist mulch, which means that it's from somebody that was chopping a tree down and they put it through one of those shredders and got all different size pieces. It has little bits of leaf in it, it has little bits of stem in it, and as long as there's no poison ivy in it, it's good stuff. And the arborist mulch is even better than sometimes the bag stuff that they have at the stores. It's also usually cheaper. You could do something like chip drop and get a whole bunch of it to your house, but you gotta have room for that, and that part can be difficult. So from here, I got about an inch of room on the top, and all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be sprinkling the mulch on top until I get good coverage. I don't put a very thick layer of mulch, but usually about an inch, inch and a half. Maybe on the in-ground plants I'll go with 2 inches, but I usually like to stay 3 or less. So an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches, something like that. And I don't like to put it too high so that when I water it, it runs off. But one of the other benefits of using some kind of wood mulch is I find it makes it a lot easier to water the plants. It doesn't push the soil aside too easily, and it just sort of filters down through the mulch better. But of course, the biggest reason is it preserves moisture. So there's less evaporative loss at the top of the container. So that there is what it looks like now. And this is done. Just like the last one, you can still see the parafilm. Now I'm gonna make sure I don't cover up the parafilm, but I can even, at this point, I can start to pull off some of the parafilm if I want. I don't want it to come in contact with the soil because I don't want it to draw moisture up the cutting, but it's not a big deal at this point. The tree is rooted well and doing well, so I can pull it off a little bit, or I can leave it. Sometimes I pull it off just so it doesn't end up in the garden someplace else. But there we go. We're all set with the up potting, and from here it's just growing. And these will take off. The container size you use will affect how they take off. Once I go from a 4x9 tree pot to something like this, it will fill this container with roots in probably a month and a half. And I can keep it at this size, or if it's something that we really want to move up to another size, I can move this up to a 5 or a 7 gallon pot in the first year, and they can get to be pretty big. By the end of the season, there's a good chance this will be 6 feet tall, and it may have figs on it. It's one of the reasons why I start some of my new varieties that I haven't had yet in January or February, because by the end of the season, a good portion of the time I'm able to get figs off of them in the first year, which is one of the great benefits of figs in general, is there's not too many fruit trees that you can put in a pot and then be eating fruit off them the same year that you started it from a cutting. So that's about it. If you didn't watch the other 2 videos, I did the one on rooting cuttings, and then I did the one on watering them and what I do with them in the grow tent. And thank you for watching.